Operation Torch, America's baptism of fire in the desert. Imagine launching an entire army onto a continent it has never set foot on, only to realize the first enemy isn't the Germans, it's chaos itself. In November 1942, the United States set out to carve a path through North Africa. The promise was simple: open the southern flank of Europe. But what they found was a maze of politics and military confusion. Inexperienced troops, inaccurate maps, generals arguing for control. And on the other side, Vichy French soldiers, technically allies, but still following German orders. The landings in Oran, Algiers, and Casablanca were plagued by friendly fire, storms, confusion, and contradictory commands echoing through barely working radios. It was improvisation on a continental scale, and it came at a heavy price. Even in victory, the Americans learned what every empire discovers too late. Sometimes a triumph is just a disaster wearing a better disguise. Kasserine Pass, the desert is a mirror of arrogance. The Americans thought they could beat Rommel with enthusiasm and gasoline. The desert answered with dust and death. In February 1943, U.S. forces faced the legendary Afrika Korps for the first time. Young commanders brimming with confidence, tanks fresh off the docks, and not a single real idea of what it meant to fight a strategist like Erwin Rommel. In the narrow valley of Kasserine, American columns moved like disoriented prey. The terrain funneled their tanks, the radios failed, and the enemy seemed to anticipate every move. When the dust finally settled, over 6,000 soldiers were dead, wounded, or captured. But the lesson was learned, and paid for in blood. From that disaster emerged a generation of commanders who finally understood the price of improvisation and vanity. Operation Husky, the chaotic leap over Sicily. The night was clear, the wind was treacherous, and soon the sky filled with parachutes, all landing in the wrong place. July 1943. The first Allied invasion of European soil was meant to mark the beginning of the end for the Axis. But what unfolded over Sicily was a tragic ballet of human failure. Overloaded planes, miscalibrated compasses, and broken communication sent hundreds of American paratroopers drifting miles off course, many into the sea, others into the deadly fire of Allied ships that, in panic, shot at their own shadows. On the ground, the amphibious landings turned into a nightmare of logistics and confusion. Coordination between the British and Americans collapsed, and entire towns changed hands 2, even 3 times in a single day. Even in victory, Husky revealed something deeply unsettling. The chaos wasn't only on the other side, it lived within the Allied ranks themselves. A curious paradox. To conquer Europe, the Allies first had to survive themselves. Monte Cassino, the mistake that became a sacred ruin. The sky over Italy trembled. And what fell wasn't just fire, it was history, shattered into pieces. In February 1944, the Allies believed the Germans were using the ancient monastery of Monte Cassino as a fortress. It was a spiritual palace, built 14 centuries earlier, the birthplace of the Benedictine order. The order came swiftly, bomb it to dust. More than 1,400 tons of bombs turned the monastery into rubble. But there was a problem. The Germans weren't there. Only after the destruction did enemy troops move in, turning the ruins into the perfect defensive stronghold. For months, American, Polish, French, and Indian soldiers fought to take that cursed hill. Every meter cost dozens of lives. The final victory brought no glory, only silence and mud. Monte Cassino proved that fear can be just as destructive as the enemy. ANZIO, the siege on the sands of indecision. They landed with the sea at their backs and Rome on the horizon. But between the two, there was fear. January 1944. The plan was bold. Land behind German lines and force the enemy to retreat north through Italy. General John Lucas had a chance to end the war on the peninsula. Instead, he dug in. For weeks, American and British troops were trapped on the beach, exposed, surrounded, and under relentless bombardment. Hesitation gave the Germans time to seal the beachhead completely. Paradise turned into a trap. The result? 43,000 casualties and a brutal reminder that caution can kill just as surely as haste. When Rome finally fell months later, the price had already been paid, in blood and sand. Operation Market Garden, the bridge that broke the rush. It was a masterstroke, on paper, and a disaster on the ground. September 1944. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery conceived a plan to end the war before Christmas, seize a chain of bridges across the Netherlands, open a highway into Germany's heart, and finish the job with one swift blow. The Americans would be the wings of that dream. But the sky turned against them. Aircraft dropped paratroopers in the wrong zones, supplies fell straight into German hands, and ground forces got stuck in the choking traffic of Dutch roads. The final bridge at Arnhem became a death trap. The tanks never made it. The paratroopers fought until their last round. When silence fell, all that remained was a bridge and a phrase that would echo through history: a bridge too far. HURTGEN Forest, the woods that swallowed an army. Neither the enemy nor the winter. It was the forest itself that killed. Between September and December 1944, tens of thousands of American soldiers were sent into the HURTGEN Forest, straddling the border between Germany and Belgium. The mission? Break through enemy defenses. What they found instead was a nightmare of trees, mines, and fog. The dense canopy blocked air support. Mines detonated beneath every step. German artillery shattered the treetops, turning them into clouds of splintered wood and steel. For 3 months, the advance was measured in meters and paid for in lives. Over 30,000 casualties to capture ground of no real strategic value. A sacrifice without glory, erased from most history books. War has no memory, only a stomach, and sometimes it devours its own children. The Battle of the Bulge, the winter that nearly broke America. Snow, silence, and then tanks, hundreds of them, emerging from the fog like ghosts of steel. December 1944. Hitler launched a desperate counteroffensive through the Ardennes, hoping to split the Allied lines. The result was a brutal clash. Under-equipped American troops trapped in freezing cold facing the German advance without immediate reinforcements. In Bastogne, the siege was complete. Soldiers with no ammo, no food, no hope, and still they refused to surrender. When a German officer demanded their capitulation, the American reply was a single word: nuts. The Allied counterattack eventually turned the tide, but the cost was devastating: over 80,000 casualties. The victory stood tall, but it came with a cruel symmetry. It cost almost as much as defeat. Okinawa, the prelude to the apocalypse. Endless rain, mud up to the knees, and planes diving from the sky like suicides of steel. April 1945. The Battle of Okinawa was meant to be the final step before invading Japan, and it became the bloodiest of them all. American troops faced a Japanese defense built for martyrdom: tunnels, caves, trenches, and relentless kamikaze attacks in waves. For 82 days, the tropical paradise turned into a graveyard. Over 12,000 Americans died, along with 100,000 Japanese soldiers and countless civilians. The ceaseless naval bombardment and the stench of rotting corpses made the very air feel poisonous. Okinawa showed the world that invading Japan would mean the death of reason itself. The atomic bomb, dropped months later, was born here, not from science, but from despair. Operation Tiger, the disaster the world almost never knew. Before the invasion that would free Europe, the sea had already taken its toll. April 1944. American forces were rehearsing for the Normandy landings in the cold waters off Slapton Sands along England's coast. Everything was real: ammunition, ships, schedules, but the Germans were listening. In the dark hours before dawn, U-boats detected the training convoy. Within minutes, torpedoes sliced through the waves. 2 American ships went down, and hundreds of soldiers drowned, many trapped in their own gear. Chaos reigned. The death toll exceeded that of some actual battles, but the truth was buried for months. Families weren't told. The press stayed silent. It was the price of secrecy, paid before D-Day even began. If you've made it this far, I'd like to ask you for something. Don't worry, it won't make your fingers fall off. Jokes aside, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to keep following this kind of content. And let me know your thoughts in the comments, or, if you'd rather, suggest a topic for the next video. See you next time.